Chairperson Jim Sawtell.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Robert Momartz.
Here.
Commissioners Phyllis Harden here. Mark Laces.
Here.
Jerry Malliott.
Here.
Jason Reese. Sorry, Jason. Lisa Ritchie.
Present. Here.
Anthony Stewart.
Here.
Steve Whitty.
Here.
Attorney Hillary Graham.
Here.
Associate Planner, I should say, Stephen Williams.
Here.
All right, first item is approval of the agenda. Has everybody received a copy of the agenda? Can
Yes.
we have a motion to approve it?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Commissioner Laces?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Momartz, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion's carried. Next item is public comment on the consent agenda or non-agenda items. A lot of folks here. I don't know if we have any members that want to comment on the consent agenda. Guess not, so I think we're good there. Next item is on the consent agenda, the approval of the minutes of the August 16, 2016 meeting. Has everybody received the minutes, and does anybody have any comments or suggested edits? No? Can we have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the August 16th, 2016 meeting.
Commissioner Laces, second.
I'll second.
Commissioner Ritchie. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, the next item is the public hearing and adoption of a resolution recommending the approval of Superior Town Center final development plan for Element Hotel, Lot 3, Block 1, Superior Town Center. Public hearing on this agenda item is opened. Is there proof of publication?
Yes, there is.
Does staff wish to make a presentation?
Yes. Stephen Williams, town staff. As stated, agenda item 6 is the final development plan for the Element Hotel on Lot 3, Block 1 of the Superior Town Center. The applicants, RC Superior and Glacier House Hotels, are requesting approval for a final development plan to construct a 4-story, 79,000 square foot hotel with an outdoor pool and 334 square foot pool building. The proposed hotel would include 121 rooms with fully equipped kitchens. As an extended stay facility, no restaurant, meeting spaces, or conference rooms are proposed. This is a rendering of the hotel's eastern facade, which would be facing Highway 36. The parcel associated with this application, Lot 3, Block 1, lies within Planning Area 1 of the Superior Town Center along the north side of Marshall Road and just south of Highway 36, and Superior Plaza Way lies to the north as well. Allowances for the hotel on Lot 3, Block 1 were included with each previous PD iteration. This proposal would encompass roughly 2.65 acres of the existing 4.8 acre lot. Lot 3 is proposed to be subdivided through a replat, which we'll also hear tonight. That replat's associated with Parks 1 and 2 final development plan. So Lot 3A, the western portion of this lot, would be transferred to Glacier House Hotels after that subdivision. Through the course of the review, the applicant's FDP sheets have been modified in order to reference Lot 3 as Lot 3A and align with the corresponding subdivision plat. The proposed land use is consistent with PDA number 3, which designated this lot for a hotel use. Additionally, the proposed hotel is compliant with the following zoning parameters that were established through that PD, which include the number of floors. They're proposing 4. The approval allowed for anywhere between 3 and 6 stories. They're proposing a 62-foot height maximum, which also is in accordance with a 90-foot height allowance for Lot 3. And then 127 parking spaces that they're showing would meet the 1 space per key or per room parking requirement outlined in the PD. Finally, the number of rooms proposed, 121, is within the overall hotel room allowance, which is 500 for the entire planned development, and 300 were specifically designated for this lot. Staff has also reviewed this use in relation to the traffic that is anticipated for the town center as a whole, and finds this proposal, which will generate roughly 1,000 daily trips, to be compliant with traffic projections for the project. The applicant's context site plan is shown here. The extent of this FDP's limits are shown in red, so you can see where the end of Lot 3A has been spliced from Lot 3B to the east. Consistent with the final development plan for Marshall Road, 2 entrance points on Marshall are shown here. It's a right in, right out, further west, and a full movement access further down Marshall. The map also illustrates emergency access vehicles, their turning radiuses and width allowances, kind of shown in red. These paths and widths have been reviewed and also reviewed against the associated plat for the emergency access easement that's proposed and found to be compliant with standards. The diagram also includes site distance lines, a little harder to see. There are these dashed lines here. Staff requested that they add them to the south as well, as that road will eventually extend. So we reviewed these site distance allowances against the planting requirements and to ensure that we had proper site distances for traffic. Staff is also required that the parking lot we also, and this is kind of in green, the pedestrian and ADA paths are shown here in green. 2 connections across the parking lot to the south are shown. This would tie in with the existing system shown on Marshall Road. Staff is also required that 2 just general pedestrian crossings to the north be shown, and they're a little more faint, but here in the northeast corner and then here in the northwest corner to eventually tie in with the town owns this tract to the north. It's listed as Superior Plaza Way. It's not technically right-of-way, it's a tract, but it is an access easement. So once staff coordinates improvements within this tract and add sidewalks or crossings as necessary, we'll have a better connection here, but that communication and outreach with the owners of Superior Plaza hasn't been done yet. So all we're requiring at this time is just some general paths to get folks across the parking lot safely and to have connectivity points in the future with as this site. And really there's been no reason to have connection between an undeveloped parcel or Boulder Valley Ice and Superior Plaza way to the north, and now there is, and we're taking the initial steps through this application, but more coordination is required. The applicant's site plan more clearly illustrates the hotel's development proposal as illustrated. The L-shaped hotel is centrally located within Lot 3A, surrounded by the 127 parking spaces, and designed to have its primary entrance face to the east, where you see this oval drop-off area. The proposed pool building, and patio area would be sited to the south and west of the hotel to maximize solar exposure. Although the primary building entrance and vehicle drop-off to this area is sited to the east, all 4 building elevations have access points for guests, and all 4 elevations also reflect, so it's 4-sided architecture essentially. There's no back to any of the hotel's facades, as we'll see later. The proposed trash and recycling enclosure is up here in the northwest corner and sits 8 feet from the property line. This technically requires an exception from the design guideline standards, which require 10 feet, and the PD, but staff is supportive of this exception in this instance, as it's a parking area that's abuts parking, and we also have medians on each side that kind of help buffer this enclosure from properties in both directions. The site plan also illustrates that the hotel is requesting an exception from there's a 0 to 35-foot setback requirement along Marshall Road. What the hotel is proposing is much greater than that. It's close to 70 feet at its closest point. The pool building sits a little bit closer, but given a lot of site design requirements, staff is also supportive of that. One of the major ones is the vehicle access for emergencies. So there's a 26-foot wide easement that would circle the entire property, and if this hotel was located on Marshall Road, fire would have to park within Marshall Road and congest that traffic. So overall, this design's better. This also allows the pool to be located in the south west corner. So staff has no concerns with this exception. We just need to acknowledge it and recognize that it's not meeting the standard that was outlined with the original PD. The site plan also illustrates the location of the monument sign that's proposed, that's shown here. There's also a directional sign shown across the drive there to the north. And although the design guidelines, again, did not contemplate monument signage for the plan development, staff is supportive of monument signage in this regard. In general, we've talked about signage standards and exceptions in the past, and we've talked about FDP exceptions. They're something that can be granted on an FDP by FDP kind of site basis. And in general, the design guidelines for signs really just address, or specifically address, what was planned for the town core. They don't address four-sided architecture. They don't address four signs on each side of the building, which is also proposed here. We'll get into that a little bit later. But as far as the monument signs are proposed, staff feels that a monument sign off of a major roadway like Marshall Road is appropriate. And then given the primary entrance being on the east side of the building, this directional signage to help direct traffic and ensure kind of efficient arrival at the hotel and not congestion are two reasonable reasons to support both of these exception requests. The proposed elevations for the hotel reflect a variety of building materials, colors, heights, and facade articulation and relief. These building elevations reflect the northern and eastern facades. The structure is designed to have an expansive main floor with up to 13-foot ceiling heights, as well as generously tall ceilings on the second through fourth levels that average 9 feet. The maximum height for the building is proposed to be 62 feet. That height is only achieved here at the main entrance, and it's kind of this entry feature tower. The rest of the building primarily is at 53 feet. Varying building materials include a French dark gray limestone kind of at the base here, stucco ephes, which is shown throughout, but this is that material in gray, and a wood grain composite, and that is shown on this tower here elevation and on the material board that's with planning commissioners now. The color palette features brown, grays, and whites and result in a modern look that is intended to complement the Centerpoint development that is currently being constructed to the west. 2 tones of that wood composite, an oak and a walnut, are proposed. This finish would be used as cladding, kind of shown on this tower here, as well as to kind of separate certain parts of the building, like the first and second floors here, as well as to frame these tower elements shown on the northern building facade. The northern facade is primarily defined by these 2 tower elements, and they use a contrasting finish for the stucco, as well as a contrasting base to set these towers apart, in addition to the bands and the caps that I just described. The east elevation is primarily defined by that tower element in the center. It also features a contrasting base. You got the limestone to the south, and then a kind of a shinier metallic base finish to the north, and then contrasting second through fourth floor elevations between the tower element and the primary white finish. This elevation is designed to face Highway 36 to the east and future development of that might occur on Lot 3B. The western and southern elevations are shown here. These elevations would face, the west elevation would face Centerpoint, and the Lot 2, the parking lot that separates the 2 lots. This one would primarily face Marshall Road. These would be the 2 elevations you see as you come down Marshall Road from McCaslin as you approach the building in a vehicle. These 2 facades also enclose the patio area. So these kind of primarily glazing areas. This is the corner that you can, this is one side of the building, and then this is the other corner of that building, if that makes sense. This is where that L occurs, essentially. This is the bottom, the northern half, and then this tucks around, and you see that. So all of this glazing is designed to kind of front the patio that separates and flows out into the pool area. Similar to the north and east elevations, materials and colors would vary and elevations would largely be broken up by columns with distinct colors and finishes. None of the 4 elevations proposed, as you can see, are the same, so every vantage of the hotel would be different. In addition to clarifying colors, materials, and building articulation, these facades also indicate the proposed locations of building entrances and wall signs. Entrances are either highlighted by the glazing I just discussed or by covered door areas, kind of shown here in white and shown down here as well. The wall signs proposed for each elevation sit around 50 feet in height and measure about 80 square feet in size. The design guidelines do not specifically address signage for hotels. Most signage guidelines, as I mentioned earlier, appear intended for retail stores with a more pedestrian scale. So heights within the design guidelines are limited to the tops of the first floors. An exception in this case is being requested to allow for 50-foot height. This is kind of similar to the medical office building height exception that we considered a couple months back, and staff finds it appropriate in this regard. As far as the size of the signs, generally through the PD, it's about 1 foot for every lineal foot of frontage, and the size of the signs are well within that allowance as well. And staff is also supportive of the 4-sided signage, so a sign on each elevation shown here. So the other thing that these illustrations include, which is a lot more faint to see, are some kind of shaded back rooftop units. So basically these elevations all show that the proposed HVAC on the roofs will all be screened by the proposed parapets. The applicant has included 3 architectural detail sheets to help illustrate the colors, finishes, and sizes, the proposed signs, the pool building, as well as the other on-site amenities. As illustrated, the proposed monument and directional signage will be finished in the same green as some of their other signs. That green is shown on your material board that's being passed around. It's also being used on the underside of the entry I meant to mention. So it's shown on the material board as a finish. It's not really a traditionally visible finish unless you're walking under the entry. You look up, and that's the ceiling for that entry. It's kind of their hallmark color. As illustrated, the proposed monument and directional signs will be green. The monument sign is 2-sided, with each sign face proposed to be roughly 40 square feet in size, measure roughly 7.5 feet by just under 6 feet. The sign would be mounted on a masonry base and have an overall height of just under 10 feet. It has the same wood kind of finish wrapping and the same colors as you see in the hotel finishes. The proposed directional sign would be mounted on a short pole and be roughly sit under just 5 feet in height and measure 10 square feet in size. The on-site amenities that include patio tables and chairs, trash receptacles, benches, and bike racks would feature a black finish, which is consistent with other final development plan approvals for the town center. This plan sheet also illustrates that the finishes of the trash and recycling enclosure down here, as well as the stamped concrete finish shown here. This sheet includes elevations for the proposed pool building and fencing. The building would have a maximum height of 10 feet 4 inches and be finished with the stucco white, which is consistent with what's shown for the hotel. A gray slat fence is also proposed. The fence is 10 feet in height to the crossbar and sits a little bit taller to each post. Staff is supportive of these finishes as well as they're consistent with the hotel finishes. And this plan sheet further defines the sizes and locations of the wall signs proposed. Staff is still working with the applicant to establish true sign bands that show dimensions so that we can control signage, location, and size in the future. But we're happy with what they're showing for their current signs. The applicant's landscape plan reflects a mix of deciduous and evergreen trees, as well as shrubs and ornamental grasses and perennials. Basically, we have foundational plantings for around the structure, and then we have parking lot landscaping for the islands in between the parking spaces. These plant selections are generally consistent with the SDC design guidelines and appropriately located. There are 2 species exceptions that this proposal is requesting, and they're in order to allow for a more shade-tolerant plant. Staff has no concerns with the proposal. The site would primarily be landscaped with a mix of trees, shrubs, and ornamental grasses. There are some sod areas proposed here to the south in this location and this location, and then we have an irrigated turf mix, or irrigated seed mix, excuse me, proposed in the southeast corner here, as well as along this property line. And staff is supportive of those two applications as well. One with the caveat that this is going to get redeveloped with more permanent landscaping once these two parcels are tied together, and because this is actually serving as a water quality pond, so it's appropriate. It's an appropriate finish considering the use. This plan sheet shows the proposed location of the parking lighting, as well as the wall and bollard lighting. There's 23 parking lights proposed. They'd be mounted on poles that are 20 feet in height. The 12 wall-mounted fixtures would be mounted at 9-foot heights at each building entrance, and there's 7 3-foot, 4-inch tall path lights, and those are primarily located along the northern portion of the building. There's one located here to the south as well. All of these lights are LED, downcast, and dark sky compliant, thus meeting the design guideline requirement, and all of them are proposed to be finished with that black, in black, consistent with the design guidelines as well. The applicant's site plan includes the required drainage, utility, and irrigation sheets. This shows the drainage plan and clarifies that the hotel is proposed to be placed at an elevation of roughly 5,480 feet, and to feature a minimum of a 2% slope away from the building corners to drain water away from the foundation. The northern portion of the site would essentially be graded to direct flows north and then east, and then there's some piping that helps get the drainage to the south and into this water quality pond I mentioned. Drainage to the south is designed to be directed to the south and then to the east to the same location. There are some improvements here that show that an outfall will occur into Park 2, and we'll get into how those two projects have been coordinated here later tonight. The applicant's utility plan sheet illustrates how this property will be served by required infrastructure, and primarily all current infrastructure exists within Superior Plaza Way, and they're pulling from the north to the south in order to serve their facility. Staff has reviewed this plan for the required easements. In short, the utilities for wet easements are kind of known at this time. The dry utilities are conceptual and pending approval of those specific providers. So we'll wrap in the utility easements that can get finalized through this plat. Otherwise, they'll need to be dedicated through separate instruments. But primarily, they're all occurring in this northeastern corner and tying into that corner of the property. There are provisions for a water line to extend all the way down to serve the required fire hydrants that are placed throughout the property. There's one in this corner and one here. This line would also be looped eventually once the water line underneath Marshall Road is installed. Similarly, there's a reuse water line or a non-potable water line that will be extended, and once that is extended, they'll tie into that line as well. The irrigation sheets basically just show the proposed irrigation plan, show that the meter will be located here in the southeast corner of the site, and how irrigation will be routed around the property to serve the foundation plantings as well as the parking lot islands proposed. Finally, staff is recommending approval of this application as outlined in staff's memo and summarized tonight. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. But I also believe the applicant has a presentation.
Thanks, Steve. Nice job. Does anybody have any questions of staff they'd like to ask?
I do. I just have, can you clarify on the parking lot situation? You said that in the future there would be access onto Superior Plaza Way. Is that pedestrian or is that vehicular? Or both?
So all we've asked for thus far is some pedestrian connectivity. Whether or not they tie in, I guess, through this. So there's no vehicle access proposed at this time for this lot. For the second site, we may look into getting that connectivity. We'll just have to reevaluate once that application comes in. But otherwise, Lot 3B is going to require a cross-access easement from Lot 3A in order to have access.
Okay. And then my second thing is that I think that all of the materials that are being used on this building are great. I think it has a very good look to it. It's very clean. And one thing that always typically gets overlooked, and because it's usually in the back of the building, is pool structures and different mechanical areas. And I think that in this case it's the same. I'd like to see that the pool enclosure, or the structures around the pool, aren't just in white, that you use some other materials to kind of, you know, tie it into the entire structure, and it's going to be a focal point. That building is right on the edge, and it's going to be, as people are coming into Marshall Road, that building is going to be visible, and it's going to be just kind of sticking out like a sore thumb. And I think it's a very simple fix to just add a couple of the materials to tie it all together. That's all I have.
Anyone else?
Couple comments, just maybe more questions after the developer presentation. But Jason, I'd like to echo what you said. I know the rendering showed the limestone actually on those exterior pool buildings, so I thought that was great. If you could consider going back to that limestone product, I think it'd be more durable too. I think with luggage and unloading and cars, that ephes just could potentially get pretty banged up right there. What I'm particularly curious about in this is how the developer intends to connect the future Lot 3B development, either to integrate the parking lots. I'd love to see some sort of maybe shared access drive, or just kind of how you're envisioning access, potential signage on Marshall Road. I mean, I'm seeing one monument sign, but would there be space then for another monument sign? So I think those are my primary concerns, as well as the decision to orient the building. I get that it's oriented toward 36, but if a future site, when that develops, that potentially is going to be entirely blocked from 36. So maybe more questions later.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, does the applicant want to make a presentation?
Good evening, Commissioners. Bill Jenks, RC Superior. Thank you so much for taking the time to review this project. I just want to make a quick introduction before Jordan takes over from Glacier House. We met with staff and with Glacier House back in January, on January 20th. That was sort of the introduction to this project. I went to a concept presentation to the board shortly thereafter, I think at the end of January, beginning of February. So we've been working really closely with Glacier House over the last 9 months on building design and site planning and everything. As a master developer, we're very happy with the result. We think it's contiguous with the town center design standards, and especially with the Centerpoint retail development that's being built right now. So definitely a big welcome to Glacier House. We're excited to welcome them to the project, and also the Element Hotel brand. A little bit of timing. If this gets recommended for approval tonight and approved at the town board meeting on the 12th, we'd plan on starting the Marshall Road construction that you approved last meeting, October 1st, turning over the hotel pad to the hotel developer sometime around December or January. And I'll let Jordan talk a little bit more about their timing. And with that, I'll introduce Jordan Scott from Glacier House Hotels.
Good evening. Thank you, by the way, Stephen. Excellent presentation. That's very odd to see a staff comment so in depth, and it helps me do my job. We, to that point, Stephen and his team have been incredibly great to work with, very responsive. And my team can definitely agree that we've never dealt with the city to respond within a week, let alone 24 hours like he has. So we definitely appreciate all the work that you put into this. We know there's a lot going on here, and hope we can answer all the questions that you have tonight. Again, Jordan Scott, I'm the president of Glacier House Hotels. We're based out of Scottsdale, Arizona. We're a full-service development company that specializes in select service, focused service, and extended stay products. They're all coined terms. It's all basically a hotel room with different amenity packages. But I'll tell you, what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about what we do, and also the Element brand. And talk more about the site itself, but Stephen really did a great job explaining it. Did you guys get that presentation? Is it-
Yeah, it should be one of the PDFs that are already pulled up.
You- This one? Oh, PDF, sorry. Look at that. So I didn't realize that we sent this over to you. Our marketing team put this together, and so I've seen it, but I'll just go with the flow and tell you a little bit about the brand. So we are a franchisee of Element by Weston. Element by Weston is Starwood's extended stay product. It was launched in 2008, and not a great timing to launch a brand. Fortunately, over the last about 5 years, you've seen growth in that product type. There's about 50 in the books being developed. We actually have 4 franchises. And in 08, from 2008 to 2015, there were only 22 built. The last one was built, actually one's in Tech Center here locally. The last one just opened up is in outside of Aspen. So great locations, great concepts. From 06 to 08, Starwood spent a lot of time figuring out what business class clients want in a hotel amenity. So they designed this lifestyle product. That's our team. So they call it Extended Stay Reimagined, which truly is. I mean, we've all stayed at Residence Inns, Staybridges, and we all have reward memberships that we belong to get the best points. And what we have with Element is not only do we have Starwoods, but also because of the merger occurring, we're going to have Marriott point referrals as well, which is a huge reservation system bonus for this kind of product type. Now, of course, that won't happen until China approves it. I think in October is the current month of approval. But all things look great. Our Starwood guys have promised it's going to go through. If it doesn't, Starwood's still a great brand. They're just not necessarily known for extended stay or business class. They're known for the St. Regis, the Westin, the W's, really high-end, full-service product type, which doesn't hurt us having the name on our signage, Element by Westin. This is taken from the Element brochure, and I'll just read it to you because it kind of defines what it is. Element is committed to helping travelers maintain a balance in their lives. Element hotels surround guests with clean design and extra space. They empower people to work hard, play hard, eat well, rest well, to stay active and be more productive. Intelligent thinking defines our experience. Sustainable practices makes it even smarter. So Element in itself says it all. I probably shouldn't mention this, but we were initially trying to find a site in Boulder. We thought that the Element brand, the product type, fit really well with the Boulder theme and connotation that Boulder provides. We found a site, and in the process of finding a site, we ran into Randy Goodson with the RC Superior. Told us about your city, told us about his plan, his facilities, and we're like, wow, this is pretty impressive. It fits right within the Boulder mentality, if you will, of outdoor activities, health and wealth, and we thought it was a great fit. So we're really excited for this location. Some of these are just kind of funny pictures. This kind of explains the core values. Fresh thinking, clever use of space, ergonomic design. The lobby, when you walk into the lobby, it's very open. The rooms are all 400 square feet, so they're all 20 by 20 for the most part, or bigger. They all have kitchenettes. They're designed so that the road warrior can stay in this hotel and feel relaxed and not feel he's got to get the next day and go to work and not feel reprieved from the previous day's work. So we love the project. Sorry. Core consumer, I'm sure you've already gone through these, but it's the healthy activities is what drives this demographic. Guests balance style with comfort. They're eco-conscious, but they're not activists. I thought that was clever. Being outside and staying active is vital with we think that a lot of our core clientele is going to come from Boulder, wanting an affordable option to stay. The ADR for this product type is around $140 a night. It's hard to find anything under that in Boulder. So I think we'll have the activities driven by the bike path to Boulder. For guests who are staying for more than a couple of days, we'll take advantage of that. We shall see. But we definitely like the capabilities of having that, let alone having this, well, you can see out your window here, this channel that you have, this detention basin, a lot of trees, very organic, fits really well with the theme of this project. Again, this talks about the Extended Stay Reimagined, social innovation, design impacts. This is a picture of the lobby. If you've been to the one in Tech Center, this is actually, I think, taken from the Tech Center. It's the existing Gen 1 product. We're now on to a Gen 2 product, a little more color involved, same, still natural light, still very large 20-foot ceilings in the common areas, great sense of arrival, great little pockets for people to socialize, coffee or a glass of wine. Here's some more pictures of the lobby area and actually the kitchen. This is the Gen 2 kitchen that's going to be put into place. We're just finishing our element in Chandler, Arizona. We're opening up in October. If you're in Chandler, welcome to check it out. It's the newest product type for the element. And a lot of these pictures have some old and new, but very clever design, very Euro, very contemporary, yet comfortable. Another key factor to this is that it's sustainable. LEED certification is a brand requirement. It actually is not anymore. I believe they removed that, right? They brought it back. They brought it back, which is great. You know, we're firm believers in that. We're also building a hotel in Whitefish, Montana. Tough city to develop in, and we're trying to make that kind of our core competency, having LEED certified buildings throughout. So it's a great value. I think that the cities like it. I'm not sure if you have any LEED certified buildings in the city today. It's expensive, but comes with that comes some efficiencies. Pardon me. So some of the efficiencies will have energy efficient mechanical units, a VRF system for the common areas, LED lighting throughout. Cool feature: the guest thermostats are connected to the front desk check-in, so that they're not always running. When the guest arrives, it clicks in. So by the time it gets to your room, you have the temperature of your choice. Low VOC product types. And construction-wise, we're using rapidly renewing materials. Of course, you guys are close to your public bus transit, which is part of the qualifications. We also will have, which is kind of before its time, you know, unfortunately the auto dealership, the rental car companies don't rent electric vehicles. They did, and they took them away. I think they'll have to come back at some point in time. So we will be putting in rechargeable stations. I think in our Chandler project, we're just putting the infrastructure in, because we're not sure what the station will be when it's time for rental cars to be choosing those cars, but we will have the infrastructure at the very least. This is, again, pictures of, this is the Gen 2, this is the new product type of the rooms. So very light, modern again, workspace. All the rooms have kitchens or mini kitchenettes. That's wrong, there's 121 rooms here. Spa-inspired bathrooms, heavenly beds by Westin, so you get still that Westin experience. Obviously complimentary, well not obviously, complimentary wired and wireless internet, refrigerators and microwaves in every unit. Our studios and suites have fully equipped kitchens, sofa sleepers. Our property amenities, actually we went a little larger here. I think this is incorrect, but our gym is closer to 1,000 square feet. As a lifestyle center, it's a very healthy lifestyle. We're going to have a larger gym. And I'll show you when we get the elevations that the gym overlooks the pool area, really open. Outdoor saline pool. We went outdoor. I know there's kind of a subjective analysis of whether we should have an indoor pool or not. We go back and forth on that. We haven't experienced any select service hotels that really do a great job in an indoor pool. They end up being very hot and humid. And with the environment we have here, with the southern exposure that we have, I know our season will be limited, but at the very least we'll have a heated hot tub year-round. And our plan is for the pool to be hot, to be heated. Obviously, with the weather you have here, so we'll have certain months that will be closed down. But that's where we're going with right now. We prefer to be outdoors. But anyways, the second point, we have a meeting lounge, what we call, and it's really kind of taken the coffee experience and making it more of a meeting space. It's not really a typical conference center. That picture is not correct. It's more of a kind of like a coffee shop. You know, people are want to be socialized and work together, but not work together. You know, I can't do it, but a lot of people do enjoy doing that, and so we're adapting to that millennial experience, if you will. We also have a 400 square foot pub, which you know, this is not a full service hotel, and it almost is turning into that. We have all the amenities that full service has. Obviously, you don't have the amount of employees staffing it. It's still select service. You still have that dollar cost yield. You need to make sure you can afford to operate. But we do have a 400 square foot pub that will be provided. Again, this talks a little about the healthy, balanced food options in the mornings. Free breakfast is included. There's actually free wine and beer happy hour at night. So, you know, just a really welcoming experience. This is the Gen 2 lobby. main seating area. Those outdoor glass partitions open up to the pool area. And behind it's the kitchen and the bars on the other side. The coffee station, coffee lounge is over where I'm standing. And then here we go with Stephen's presentation. So I could be more than happy to answer more questions about the brand or dive into any concerns or questions you have on the product or elevations. And I have my architect and civil engineer here as well if you have any things I can't answer.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
Curious on the wood composite material. How long have you been using that material? How old is that material? Is it going to age well in our Colorado sunshine?
That's a great question for my construction manager. So it's a great question, and we're concerned about it too. I don't know if you want to come up here and have any insight there. It's a brand requirement by Starwood. So my answer as a generic is going to be that Starwood put a lot of thought into it, and so we don't know unless you have further.
The material's been used for a long time. It's a composite material. It's got a laminate on both sides and then a plastic composite, and they sandwich it together. It's got a long lifespan. I know they've been using it for quite some time. A lot of car dealerships use it. It's the same type of material, just with a different skin on the front.
Gotcha.
So it ages just fine. We're using it in Arizona and a little hotter in Arizona. Yeah. So we're using the same product there. I believe it's got a pretty long warranty on it too. So
Okay.
we don't have any concerns with that.
Great.
This is I'll throw them through these just so you have, because you have them. This is our Chandler project that we're finishing. This is that product type. You know, we got some feedback. I know we received some feedback from RC Superior on the color palette itself, and that the grain looks like a checkerboard, which, you know, we can respect that and appreciate that. This was actually, we changed the brand requirement to be this, but we have modified this section of it to go with the darker grain and just change the darker color and just change the grain to get less of a checkerboard and more of a wood finish.
Okay.
Can you talk to the timeline for construction?
Great question. So Eric is our general contractor on our site. We have a 12-month built-in schedule from grade to C of O. I say C of O because it takes about 30 days from us to finish C of O to open our doors to the public. So it's a true 13-month schedule, the 12-month schedule of construction. As far as timetables, RC Superior is delivering the Marshall Road to our front door, and I believe he's looking at December. We're ready to go. If we could have stamp drawings with Steve and his team tomorrow, we'd be going vertical. So it's a function of that. Obviously, getting through utilities required, but our start date is March, April. Presuming that Stephen responds within 24 hours on our planning submittals as well, building submittals. But yeah, we're March, April. We're ready. We're fully funded, and we actually Starwood's got commitment dates as well. So we're kind of, I think, on it a little bit.
Anyone else? Jason? No?
So I have one. So, Mr. Scott, with all these amenities that this hotel has, how was it decided to leave out the event or meeting space in this particular hotel?
Well, it's a good question. We have this lounge that can be converted into meeting space if required. We find that the market is, the client that are staying at this hotel are there to work outside and come back to the hotel and live. And so we do have that amenity as an option. It can be repositioned to be a meeting space. It's an open room. We're just designing it so that's in boutique cubicle formats. So it can be, but at this stage we have not set up to be a kind of a sales or profit center. It's more of an amenity feature.
Thank
That
you.
helps
That
answer your
answers the question, yes.
Yeah, okay.
It does.
I have another question. Just related to kind of from an operational perspective, do you have any concerns that your front entryway is kind of around the corner from your building?
You know, we thought a lot about that. Unfortunately, because it wasn't necessarily a design choice, let's do this. It was a functionality of the land positioning itself.
Right.
And your point is very valid about, yes, right now, let me go back to the survey, because the survey shows the highway. Right now, this shows excellent sense of arrival. Everyone who drives to Superior, to Boulder is going to see this hotel. And the future is the best place to have it for that reason. Of course, down the road, if good old Billy here decides to sell off another piece to someone else, or we don't do phase 2, there's going to be a building there. We understand, we recognize that. And so I can't answer that question. I can't say, this is a brilliant concept and this is why we did this, right? But I can tell you that the sense of arrival that occurs, and really these, it's on this, sorry, here we go. This has the most dimension of the whole entire building, and this creates a sense of arrival, right? And the signage is on great locations on that western view. We have a lot of depth, a lot of angulation, a lot of product type. If you see the renderings, the pool material is that stone. So we agree 100% with you in that thought process. Operationally, people don't book hotel rooms by driving by anymore, right? They book on their cell phone. They book via Expedia, unfortunately for us. They don't book direct. They book through Marriott or Starwood, but they don't go and say, where am I staying? I can't find it. They plug it into navigation. They see it. So I think for the first year to 3 years before another building is built there, we're going to have great views. And then for us as an operational, it's the first 2 years when we need to get momentum and get lease up, and that's when that's most important. So for that intent, I think we're just fine.
Another thing, and can you speak briefly maybe to the request for variance and setback? Is that setback required because of the shape of the building, the shape of the land, or a combination of both? We have 35, we have almost 70 feet in the front, and then 8 feet, looks like, to the north. Is that due to grading, or is it?
I honestly can't tell you. I mean, I was a little surprised to find it, and I just wanted it related. I think that I think that the intent of any setback minimum is to create a sense of enclosure, but Marshall Road doesn't necessarily, isn't, I guess, in my mind, one of the roads that you'd need to have some sort of enclosure on. But it's hard to say. I mean, I think that too, that they, when this was originally planned, Lot 3 wasn't going to be split, or it was just thought of as a whole. And so bringing something closer to Marshall Road ties it a little bit into the town center more than Superior Plaza to the north. But, I mean, I think given the site constraints, given the way that this, lot is proposed to be split and the amenities that are shown, but one of the big things in my mind was the access for the emergency vehicles. You'd much rather get that off of Marshall Road and not have an emergency response occurring on a major roadway like that. So I didn't have any real concerns with it, but I don't have the history as to why that 0 to 35 was originally set, and I don't think Bill does either, because it predates both of us. So I can look into it though, if you like.
Well, it's
So-
just interesting, if they were gonna be cutting setback off of the rear, making that 8 feet instead of 10, why wouldn't we just move that building a little bit southwesterly to closer to?
You're talking about the trash enclosure at this point?
Mhm.
The trash enclosure is more of in order to get those turning radiuses and everything and get the parking. So, for a hotel of this size, they've got a little bit extra parking, but most of those parking spaces are already being kind of dedicated to the employees that they're proposing. So, to have your minimums, and I don't think the hotel either from a business operations standpoint wants to have any less parking. So they could propose an exception to a parking space and maybe get some change there, but nobody really wants to ever sacrifice parking. So, but in this instance, 8 feet versus 10 feet, it's one of those visual things that I don't think you can really tell a difference of. And given the fact that it's surrounded by parking, and usually separations, building minimums are intended to have a separation so that you're not too close to another structure on another property, and that doesn't exist in this instance either. So,
And I'd quickly add, typically the 35-foot maximum is put in to make sure that there's not a large parking field like you typically see in front of a strip center, mall, or something like that, with a building pushed up against the freeway, which I think especially would have been a concern when this was one big lot. It easily could have had just a big parking lot where the current ice rink is, and then push the building up against the freeway. since the lot's being split and the building's getting pushed closer to Marshall, I think this is a completely appropriate response, especially given the surface parking on the adjacent city parcel and the retail center next to it. So it's one of those things where the PD does its best to anticipate future development, but you can't always get it exactly right.
Thank you.
How many employees do you anticipate working at the hotel on a given day?
Given day, well, we'll have about 20 employees total, 3 shifts, and a functionality of how busy we are. The great thing about extended stay product type, I shouldn't say this, it's not really a great thing, but it's the truth, is that housekeeping requirements, people are staying longer. So you don't have to do full clean turns, right? You go in, tidy up the bed, and hopefully the towels are hung up, so you don't have to clean the towels. So it's a low yielding overhead requirement. But to answer your question, sorry, it's about 20 people total.
So with the, this eco concept that you guys have for your company, your staff, employees, will you be providing them with public transportation passes with RTD or anything, since the hotel is right on the corridor?
So that's a great question. What we would do require is staff carpooling. Yeah, staff carpooling is a requirement. So it's basically you take shifts when your carpooling requirements are up, and so if that's something that can't be accomplished, we will provide that for sure. Yeah. It's definitely a great amenity to have, no doubt about it. Yeah.
Okay. I have one other question about lighting. You mentioned that there'd be the night sky lighting for the exterior lighting. However, will there be a reduction in the number of lights that are run during evening and night hours in order to try and reduce a little bit of that light pollution?
Let me go to the elevation here and see if I can point out. The lighting, actually, if you look at it's very minimal. It's basically covers the, I'm sorry guys, I wish I could find this back easier. It's in, I'll point out first. Everywhere you see Trespa, there's lighting. Yeah, I was going to point out. Yep, sorry. Everywhere you see, yeah, gotcha. Everywhere you see Trespa, there's LED, kind of like a rope lighting. It's like a tape, and so it just emits the feature, but it's not incredibly bright. To help answer your question. Yeah, right. Low level ambient, but it's cool, and it's not. It's definitely something. We're building these hotels, and I mentioned Whitefish. They require no light. They allow no, almost no signage, and we're using the same kind of LED features as we are for this hotel. So.
All right. Yeah.
I do have a couple more. I think, sorry, let me get back to my notes. And this may be more question related to Bill, but I'm not sure what you intend for that future development parcel. Could you maybe speak to that? Are you talking to folks? Are there, I mean, to me, it looks pretty compromised as far as access.
Yeah, and it's not actually compromised. We have obviously thought about that quite a bit. Glacier House actually has an option to buy that second parcel, and they're considering doing a second phase hotel themselves. If they decided not to exercise that option, we obviously have the right to sell it to someone else, probably for another hotel. It's a great hotel site. It's zoned for a hotel. That's what we envision being there, another 100 to 120 room hotel. Do you have a pointer?
I do, I think there's one up there, but go ahead. That's okay.
So as part of our agreement for the sale with Glacier House, we're actually executing a reciprocal access easement with them. So that allows access across all of the public parking area, and all of the parking will be shared in the future once this additional parking is built out. This hotel guest can park over here, this hotel guest can park over here. It's all reciprocal. But the main access is intended to be off of this left turn in through here, and then this actually connects. This is a driveway that connects into the future parking lot over here, as well as this one up here. So it becomes a big loop around the entire site with another hotel situated generally sort of here. So there'll still be some freeway access for the Element Hotel, The new hotel would be closer to the freeway, but, you know, a little further from Marshall. So it's all intended to work really well. Glacier House has a plan for that already. We've seen it, we've reviewed it in context with this, and I'm pretty comfortable it's gonna work.
What about signage?
Yeah, signage, that's a great point. I think we should, something I need to work with Jordan on over the next week is look at where the future signage would go. Obviously, we will need signage on Marshall for that additional hotel product back here. And we'll just have to look closer in a, you know, bigger scale at this island, how much room there is there. Maybe one of the signs moves up to this island and the other one comes here, or maybe they're on either side of the entry here, and I think we can easily fix that.
Any opportunity to make that more of, I don't know, just rather than having them pull into a parking lot, have that more of a drive aisle or something to reconfigure some of that parking as that site develops? I mean, would your agreement with Glacier House enable you to revise that parking lot at all?
So either, under the existing agreement that we have, either party can kind of change their own parking as long as they meet their required parking demand by themselves without relying on the other person. They're allowed to use the other person's and back and forth, but they have to meet their own still. So getting rid of those parking spaces would probably be a problem because it'd be hard to find a 20 or so spaces to replace that. We are doing some enhanced paving at a crosswalk here, and also I believe you're doing enhanced paving at the main entry here, so it's gonna be a nice porte cochere, grand entry experience type of thing. And the entry to the second hotel will likely be oriented somewhere similar, kind of off that porte cochere area. So you'll kind of come in to this corridor and you'll see this nice grand entrance to both of the hotels here, and I think it's a pretty nice experience. And we'll obviously have, you know, signage and landscaping kind of flanking that entry.
Yeah, I get where I mean, not knowing the future, it's hard to kind of envision some of that, but it'd be nice to see some flexibility in your agreements or with parking counts or, you know, kind of wherever you guys land, just to make sure that that flows well.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, I agree. And like I said, each party does have the ability to change the parking as long as they still meet it. So, yeah, there is an opportunity to upgrade this at some point if there was a necessity to.
Any further questions?
I've got a couple of questions. I don't know if it's for Mr. Scott or Mr. Jenks, but your option to purchase that second lot that's being undeveloped in the back there, is there a deadline on that, or is that an open-ended thing? There is a deadline?
Yeah, there's a deadline. Yeah,
Okay. Where you need to exercise that option or pass?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, Mr. Jenks, then I'm sure you've been scouting that out with other potential investors who are gonna purchase that lot if Mr. Scott does not.
Yeah, of course, and there are other interested parties that would do similar hotel class. You know, we'd, for simplicity's sake, I'd love to keep working with Jordan and with Glacier House. It's been a pleasure so far. So we're very hopeful that they decide to exercise that option. The deadline is a year. They can extend it 2 years. So we'll know in either a year or 2 years whether they decide to make that leap for the next hotel. We hope they do, but if they don't, obviously there are other hotel developers out there that would be happy to build another hotel there.
All right, we'd have to wait at least 2 years for him to decide whether he wants to exercise his option.
There's an expiration 1 year after their first closing, so if they close on this property in, say, January of 2017, that first option expires January 2018.
Okay.
They can elect to pay another option payment, put more money up in exchange for having another year to decide. So by that point, by that point I would expect them to have a pretty good idea whether they want to put up a good amount of money to keep the option open and keep it going for another year, which, you know, in all likelihood they would go ahead and move forward with the development, or pass and let us, you know, market it outside.
Okay. And so then as I'm reading through the narrative on the hotel, it says the remaining portion of Block 1, Lot 3 to the east, which is this property we're discussing, right, is to be subdivided and will be part of a future FDP. The subdivision is going to be part of the preliminary final subdivision plat submitted concurrently with FDP for STC Parks 1 and 2. So that Parks 1 and 2's decision is being hinged on his option, correct?
No. So that, all that is saying, sorry, Stephen, I'll respond to that. All that is saying is that the lot split's occurring with the park proposal, but it'll be severed, two separate parcels, but that's the extent of it. There's no FDP tied to the development of, there's no FDP for Lot 3B. There's no timetable for that.
Right. But the park's moving forward.
The park's moving forward, correct.
It's that the replat's occurring with the parks rather than with the hotel.
I'm sorry, I didn't
It's that
understand
the
you.
replat,
So right now, this whole thing is one single lot.
Right.
Because the parks are, actually, the park plat that's going on right now and you're hearing later tonight actually adjusts the southern boundary of the larger site. We decided to just include this lot split with that existing plat process rather than going through the existing park plat process and then doing this lot split separately down the road. It just saves a little bit of time. So we do need the park plat to be approved and recorded by January so that we can sell half of the lot so that it's created. But that's really all that's saying is that the plat and the separation here is being accomplished by the park plat that you'll be hearing later tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, is there anybody in the audience who wishes to speak, who hasn't had an opportunity? Alex?
Alex Arnello, I'm Public Works Director. I'm sorry, I hadn't asked these questions before during our staff process, but for the applicant, you know, we're going to have great service to the airport, and fitting in your eco-friendly design, it'd be nice for you to have a program to discourage rental cars and get direct access from the airport. We also have call and ride service now that we can take your hotel guests right through your front door, at least during the day anyway. But the other question I had was on bikes. I noticed you have a weight room and a swimming pool and so forth, but you're right next to the US 36 commuter bikeway and also the Coal Creek Regional Trail. Are you going to have any provisions for bicycles for your guests? And do you have a place to store them? And would you be interested in also a bike share program that we may get going in the next couple of years? Would you have a room somewhere on site to store bikes?
It's a great question, and it's come up on a few other projects. At this time, we don't have in-house bike rental programs, but we are open to third-party vendors to provide those services. I think as we get operations going and see what the pent-up demand is, obviously there's great amenities here for it, so it's something we want to look into as an amenity. But at this time, we don't have that in-house at least.
What about the storage, though?
Fortunately, we have a lot of storage here. This is a developer frustration, but this is not. It has a lot of open space that sometimes won't be used, and so there's storage in the back office location. If you look at the store right here, this door accesses all this open space, the back space, which is all mechanical room storage, and there's more than enough to store 20 bikes back there. I don't think we need 20 bikes, but 10 bikes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Scott.
Yep.
So
Anybody?
then, I'm sorry, so then the follow-up question would be, is there going to be access from the hotel to the bike path in phase 1 or phase 2? Because I thought that we saw that there wasn't, or we read that there was not.
Probably not directly, but through the sidewalk loop to get you connected to Coal Creek Trail, Alex, maybe.
So staff has requested that that connectivity be provided on their context plan. It's something that's normally shown. Pretty obvious route, you know, is just to get them down to Marshall Road, which already has the bike paths. But we're also, you know, we would encourage them to link through Lot 3B in order to get access. There's going to be access directly to the north, which Alex is probably about to say, to the regional Highway 36 bike path. So that there's a connection almost directly north of where the lot split between Lot 3A and 3B is. And there's also a connection further directly east to get to the bike path as well. So it is ripe for bike connectivity, and we're hoping to encourage it as much as we can.
Yeah, just to follow up on that comment, we're building the bike path back over here. And we've been struggling with cross-access with Superior Plaza, because obviously they've hard to go through a developed site. But we have access right by the old Chicago parking lot. We'll have a ramp right up to the bike path right there, so you could walk or bike through there. It's not the greatest, you're dealing with vehicles. It could be in this strip, if you continue that on, that could also hook up to the bike path, depending on the design of the next hotel site. Also, there will be connections, between Breaks Plus and Superior Liquor. We'll have an access right up there. Again, you're going through a parking lot. So we have some challenges here to get users to the bike path. So hopefully we'll work with the developers as they come in to get those connections.
Thanks, Alex. Other questions? Anybody else from the audience who wishes to speak? If not, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Comments by the commission. Who wants to go first? Jason?
As I stated earlier, I think the project itself, with the different design elements, it's very inviting. From a 4 facade project, I think it'll work really well in this space. And it seems like you're open to looking at utilizing the different materials for the pool area. That was my only concern on this entire project, and I thought the presentation was very good. But I think it's a good looking project.
Great. Anyone else?
I'll just say that I had never actually heard of the Element brand before this presentation or before we got our packet. But in reviewing the packet and seeing that it's eco-friendly product, I think that's great in Boulder County. And I think there's going to be a bit of a challenge of I think getting the word out that who Element is. But I think that as time goes on, that the fact that it's an extended stay product and eco-friendly, I think that should be a driver, and I think it's consistent with the feel of Superior, the feel of Boulder County, what we want to do in Town Center. So, and I think it looks great, and I think it's going to be a great product, and I wish it success.
I would agree. I think it's not quite maybe what we had envisioned, when we set out to develop or kind of envision this corner of the town center. But I think if this is what the market has shown, is a viable hotel for this site, then I think they've done a really good job with some of their provisions. I would kind of look to staff to see if he feels like we need to condition, upgrading the materials on the pool building, or if you feel like, you've got enough cooperation with the applicant that we can see that happen.
I thought that they consented to that tonight, but I'll definitely follow up.
Okay.
So.
And again, my only comment is really just encourage cooperation with the RC Superior and the Glacier House Group as the potential development on the lot to the east. I think that's my primary concern.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I've got a few things to say. Stephen, thank you very much for your presentation, and the applicant. It was very well done. I especially like the design and the colors of the property. It's going to look great because that's the entrance into the new town center, and it really needs to have a wow factor to it. And I think that the modernness of it is going to look fantastic, along with Lot 1, Block 1 when that gets put up as well. I do have a concern about that back lot being separated. What might come up there, but beyond that, it looks like a great project, and I hope we can get it off the ground soon.
Others?
Yeah, I would agree with what the commissioners have said thus far. I think it's a very good-looking product, and, you know, it is kind of what I envisioned. It's modern, it's sleek, it's, you know, it's eco-friendly, all of those things that have been mentioned. I also like the fact that it does have the four-side facade, and that there is branding on each side of the building, because it gives the feeling that there is no rear of the building, if you know what I mean. And, that's one of the things that I was concerned about when having a hotel there backing up to existing retail space, is that you don't have those retailers that have been there looking at the back of a hotel. So I think that the designers have really done a good job with that. I also like the way that the brand will come on board, kind of, and be one of the will be one of the first in our market to have a hotel like that, and I think that it'll do really well. So I'm looking forward to getting started on it as well, and I do wish you much luck with that. I think that's all I have.
All right, thanks,
Thanks.
Anthony. Anyone else?
I like it a lot because it's consistent with the theme. I just hope that it does well enough where you guys can take the other piece of land and develop that as well, so we don't have to be concerned about what might slide in there.
Well, I agree with everything you all have said. I think it's a beautiful building. It's a nice design. I think you will probably have good luck with getting it used with families coming in here to Boulder Valley Ice and looking for multi-evening stays as their kids and people they know are participating in those events. And you know, I think you have a great product. I love the Weston branding. It's a quality product, well recognized. So I'd like to see it move forward, and I wish you the greatest success too. So with that said,
Jim, can I make
Phyllis?
a couple of comments? I guess the extended stay is something that we don't have around here, especially across the road. So I think that would be a good fit to go in here. So that's just my comment on that.
I agree, Phyllis. I think the price point is attractive. I mean, it's a very high-quality product. It looks like to me at a very attractive price point that, you know, you would have families that could pop for something like that for a very long weekend. So, I guess with all that said, does anybody care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Laces.
Approving resolution number PC-11, Series 2016, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the Town of Superior recommending approval of Superior Town Center final development plan for Element Hotel, Lot 3, Block 1, Superior Town Center.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Reese, final discussion, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion's carried. All right, so we have one more on the agenda tonight. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing and adoption of a resolution recommending approval of final subdivision plat for Lot 3, Block 1, Tracks A and B, and Superior 1 of Superior Town Center. Filing 1B and Superior Town Center final development plan for Parks 1 and 2, Tracks A and B. We'll go ahead and call the public hearing to order. Do we have proof of publication?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Thanks. Thanks, Phyllis. Stephen, do you have a presentation for us?
I do. This one's going to be a bit shorter than the first one. I'm going to talk about the replat application and kind of give you an overview of that, and then I'm going to turn it over to our Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Director, Patrick Hammer, to give a broad overview of the final development plan. And I believe our consultant, Ian Anderson, is also going to speak and give you a more detailed overview of the actual park proposal. So I'll get into the less interesting stuff first, and then you guys can see the final park design. Our second application concerns final subdivision plat, as I stated, and then the final development plan for Parks 1 and 2 of the town center. The Parks 1 and 2 would be located on tracks A and B. So I'll briefly outline what is being proposed for the plating application, and clarify that our applicant is, our co-applicants are RC Superior, the current property owner, and property owner of Super Lot 1. They'll continue to be the property owner of that, as well as the town of Superior, who will eventually control and maintain Parks 1 and 2. As illustrated by this overlay, this proposal includes land within both planning area, so everything kind of shaded in red, within planning areas 1 and planning areas 2 of the town center. And just bear in mind that this is probably no configuration you guys have seen before, but it's reflective of the current platting status of the property. So the preliminary or the primary elements of this proposal concern making adjustments to Lot 3, which we just discussed, which is adjusting the southern boundary line, and you'll see that with when I show you the current plat. But then the other big piece, as we just discussed, is splitting Lot 3 into lots 3A and 3B. The big piece concerning the other FDP application that you're going to hear tonight are creating Tracks A, and that really involves enlarging the current configured Tract A into this shown configuration, and then Tract B, which is shown over here. The remainder piece, kind of shown in red, is what will be left over of the super lot that currently exists, and the areas shown in gray are the proposed right-of-way dedications. The other, the major correction that needs to be done and has been required by staff is to get Tract B to align with what is shown for Park 2, which will also make sense here in a second. But shown in green here are the current configurations of Tracks A and B, so they're much smaller in size. Tract A is 2.4 acres, and it will increase to 9.15 acres, and Tract B shown is just under 3 acres, and it'll increase, as the current plat shows, to just over 9 acres as well, but that's going to be reduced once we get that parcel dimension to match what is shown for Park B. Hopefully this is all making sense. So Super Lot 1 is generally decreasing in size significantly, but it contains portions of what is going to be shown as Creekview Way, or will eventually become Creekview Way, and then development lots further to the south. Super Lot 1 is not platted as these blocks that are shown within the plat or the PD reflect, and it's because we don't have development proposals for these lots currently, and we haven't dedicated right-of-way, so these lots basically just haven't been defined. But as you'll see potentially later, or as you've seen in your application materials, the current floodway or floodplain boundaries actually impact these lots as well. So until that gets revised, these lots won't be defined either. So this is the kind of a glimpse at the final development plan for the site plan for Parks 1 and 2. Lot or Tract A would increase to this size and be encompass Park 1, and then Park 2 will sit on the east side of Marshall Road and encompass Park 2. So the current configuration of the south corner here and then the end piece here need to be reflected on the current final plat, and the surveyor is working on that now. It's just not something that I was able to get updated for your application tonight, but it's something that needs to be done and will be done before the town board sees it next week. So in addition to the right-of-way dedications, there's also 3 vacations that are proposed through this plat, and they're shown here in orange, and they were detailed on the project narrative. There's a detention facility or detention grading easement here. There's a utility easement that's been abandoned that runs kind of southwest to the northeast, and then there's a trail access easement that's being vacated here due to the realignment of that trail. It's not necessary anymore. So none of those easements, this was actually kind of intended or originally put in place to build the detention facility that currently exists. And for a couple of reasons. One, that the town will now own that parcel. No similar easement is required, and that detention facility is currently constructed. Also kind of means that it's no longer necessary. And then this is the final sheet of that final plat, sheet 3, and it basically shows the easements that are proposed. And I clarified this to some degree when we went through the parks or the hotel proposal, excuse me. What this shows are the access easements. So there's a access and emergency access easement that's 26 feet in width that circumnavigates the entire property, and then there's some additional water line easements that also run through the property. They're just labeled as utility easements. This one is for the water meter. This is one that will serve a fire hydrant. Other ones down here to the south, this serves a fire hydrant, as does this one. So essentially the wet utilities are known. The dry utilities are still being determined, and if we get those determinations prior to the recording of this plat, I'll have that plat updated to reflect those easements as well. Similarly, there's some utility, kind of conceptual utilities shown within the parks project, and those are conceptual at this point. If they get finalized, we'll also get those easements. It's better practice to have those easements shown on a final plat than to have them dedicated by separate instruments. So we're doing our best to get those reflected in this plat, but it'll kind of be based on timing. But staff is still working with both applicants to coordinate those aspects of this project, and has conditioned both applications to get those achieved, either by separate instrument or by updating these plats. And then the other big condition on this, which I've already mentioned, is just for the plat to actually be updated to reflect what you're going to see for Park 2 on Tract B. I'll turn it over to Patrick. Thanks.
Good evening, Patrick Hammer, Director of Parks, Rec, and Open Space. Thank you again for taking the time to review the parks. I think this is my second time bringing forward a park plan to the group. I know Martin Toth, my predecessor, is now Assistant Town Manager, brought something forward to the commission when we did Founders Park. So I think it's been a process that's worked well, having Planning Commission kind of weigh in on town parks, as these are amenities that benefit the entire community. Just a little bit on format. Ian Anderson with Matrix Design will probably do the bulk of the presentation, but I'm just going to briefly touch on the history of the project and how we've got to where we are now. This project started actually several years back with a pretty extensive community engagement process. A lot of it took place in this room. We hosted meetings kind of throughout the community when we just kind of had these really general kind of conceptual pieces of land to work with, and we actually sat with the community over a series of meetings and played with these little scale cutouts of baseball fields and basketball courts and parking lots. And over the course of a couple of years, started to identify some of the main park layouts, the big athletic surface on Park number 2, and the more passive use over here on Park number 1. And you'll see reflected in your cover memo that there's a series of committee recommendations. This both OSAC, Open Space Committee, and ProStack spent the better part of 2 years reviewing design plan after design plan, and we would go back and we would tweak, working with the land architects originally with design concepts. And then we'd bring it forward to the town board, and the town board would have some tweaks and changes. And last year, 2015, the board became interested in us adding in improvements to the creek corridor, a lot of that coming from the damage that we saw after the flood in 2013, and really wanting staff and consultants to figure out a way to tie together the two park sites with this really kind of amazing creek feature. Originally, we were just looking at north of the creek here and south of the creek here. This little parcel over here was never really considered, and we really hadn't looked at opportunities to improve the park by adding in the creek. So a lot of what you're going to see tonight and hear from Ian is the process we went through to tie together the park amenities with this other really amazing opportunity we had, which was adding the creek feature in there. Several of the features that you see within the parks are direct reflections of us working with our advisory committees and the town board to achieve certain goals that the committees had throughout the process. But I think, as with our other park projects, we'll kind of just pick a starting point, and I'll have Ian kind of go through and explain the process. We also have a 3D flyover that he'll kind of take everybody through, and as questions come up, we're happy to clarify, and then we also, if needed, have some more of the technical detail if we need to flip to it. But with that, I'd like to present Ian Anderson with Matrix Design. He and his firm have really done the majority of the work on the park design as well as the creek corridor.
Hello, my name is Ian Anderson. I'm a landscape architect and senior associate with Matrix Design Group, and I'm fortunate enough to serve as the project manager for this project. We've got a great team of folks that we worked a lot together with on urban creekfront parks. Those are one of our favorites, and we certainly look at this as the future crown jewel of the Superior Parks Open Space Network. We hope that someday when after this is built, when somebody says, what's the heart of Superior, they'll point right at this park. And that's how we look at this, that this is the city venue. And so we want to make that as flexible, both passive, active, high energy and calm serenity all in one. And we think you have the means to do that. And one thing I think that Patrick mentioned, the floods hit everybody hard, and now everybody's come back and fixing things, and there's a very nice permitting window that if the Corps says, yeah, you got beat up there, we're going to help you get back that. And so we think there is a path there, and if not, there's other ways certainly to get there. But, urban drainage and flood control is kind of that permitting agency, all things drainage, and they have looked at Cold Creek, the entire reach of it, and they saw this part and said, in this segment, we need some channel stability. They made a recommendation. It's very loose, but that you would need roughly 3-3-foot drops. So what they like to do is take kind of an uncontained stream that pops out of its channel out and get it into a channel and set some stable drops that are going to hold up in those big events. So we saw your park project and that drainage project and a perfect chance to marry those two up. And so that's what we've been trying to do with this project. And we don't need to get too far into programmatically, but obviously this is becoming a more passive end of the park. We've got this great lawn area that can accommodate softball field, although we're not putting any infrastructure. We're not going to skin an infield. We're not going to do backstops. We're not going to do any of that. It's just going to be a nice big open lawn that could support a game of softball or frisbee or picnics. We thought there was an opportunity there for, we saw the stage that was envisioned in that concept plan, and where's the best place to put it? It's in the low end of the site, and we've got this great backdrop, or what we consider to be a great backdrop, or of this elevated road. So the park is really fantastic in that you have these upper developed areas and a lower natural area, and so this is where it all comes crashing together. And so we're trying to lump most of the disturbance area of the creek where we're putting those drops in, where we want to armor up the edges, where people can sit. We want to gang that up really around the bridge, because that's a permitting opportunity, is that we know we're going to disturb that, so let's disturb that in the right way. And so we really want to hug those improvements to this, one, because it's the center of the park, it's the fulcrum, the nexus, it's where everybody's going. It's a great opportunity to make that bridge an iconic element that becomes an image of Superior. It's got shade underneath it. We don't want it a weird, creepy bridge. We want a shady, wonderful space to come and get your kids in the creek and out of the sun. So we look at that stuff as what could be considered mundane infrastructure as an opportunity. And so, since that concept plan was done, this road was actually a little further north, and someone in their infinite wisdom said, wow, it'd be nice to get a little piece of that development in here, and we thought that was a great idea. That's your tavern on the green, to kind of serve all these park uses. And so that has changed a little bit, but when that came in, there was a planned play area there. So we have figured out a way to kind of thread that playground across the grade, which we like doing. We like slope, we don't like flat. And so we've taken advantage of that to the best way possible, and we'll see that a little bit more in the fly-through. But then that spills out onto this, very large field right now that could accommodate any sport imaginable. We made it as big as humanly possible. We're encroaching a little bit into some CDOT drainage area. There's a way to do that, but really giving you the biggest venue possible to do whatever you could possibly imagine out there. And doing so, knowing that some of those could require spectator seating, could require concessions, restrooms, scorekeeping. So we've added a facility here to accommodate that, as well as hardened up some bleacher seating that then kind of transitions into natural turf slopes. So you got a little of each. You got formal seating. You could someday come in and put backrests and benches in there if you really want to make it comfortable, or let people bring their own. But again, just flexibility. And then as you get out from this kind of core area, what is very important and is going to be important to the core and urban drainage is that we do get back to that natural creek condition of a riparian shelf, wetland herbaceous plantings, cottonwood shade trees, all the natives that are indicative to the stream corridors, is we really want that to show through. So we're really just going to be articulating the edge in this an area that we know is going to be disturbed. There are probably going to be some options for this pond we're finding. That's another study that we'll be looking at later, hopefully. But we might not need that big of a pond. And so that might give us more parking. It might give us more development. It might give us more park programs. So it's a very dynamic, exciting project, and a lot of moving pieces right now. But we really feel positive about where the plan is landing. And I would like to just, and let's take you through the park here. And I might just pause it on a couple points here. How about right here? So, this park, one thing this park has to do is it has to deal with off-site drainage, and we have to deal with that from a couple places. From the new Marshall Road extension, we're getting about a half an acre runoff from the Centerpoint parking lots. We've got some flows that come out of the pond through the park. We are creating our own impervious areas and rooftops that we need to drain. So usually you try and collect that in a low point, which usually means there's some ponds down near the creek, which means you kind of have to create this depressed area that fills up, and it gets kind of swampy and gross, and you can't really get that close to the creek there. And what we saw was an opportunity is that there was a natural low point in Marshall, and we've got some drain inlets that are going to be coming here, and right now they just show those inlets coming into the park. So we either have to bioswale or put ponds or work that water through here in ditches and conveyance methods. But what we saw was another opportunity of terracing here, and what this technically is a porous landscape detention, or PLD. These are big open areas where you direct water, and they're designed to infiltrate down. But if they fill up, they spill into the next one, and so on and so forth, so that by the time the water makes it out of here, we have done our due diligence in treating it in terms of water quality, and so now in big events it can all flow to the creek. So by hugging that up here, we're opening up more creek front here. We thought that was important. This is to be sure, this is a more expensive storm drainage option, but you know, can you put a premium on the creekfront parkland in this area? That is something that we'll do the math on and give you guys options. But we felt pretty strongly about that not only is it a way to free up some land here, but it's a demonstration. It's the city to show how you can do stormwater best management practices, because this is PLDs are kind of at the forefront of that. And so to keep moving on here, you will notice that the bridge deck is translucent, and it's not because we're going to build it out of some fancy glass epoxy resin or something. It's because we think that's a whole nother FDP. That is an iconic element. We heard that from council, is that they are looking at, this shouldn't be a precast double T bridge with iron handrails. It needs to be something a little better. So we've looked at some suspension options, some tied arch options. We're doing a bridge structure support. So we're going to come back to you guys with more information on that. So for now, we didn't want to muddy the waters of the park with this, knowing how important of a feature that is. So that's why we're kind of rendering it that way, to show you that there will be a bridge there. And that gets us to this play area. This is probably the part of the park we're most excited about. You know, we are hardening up the cut banks. That's the outer edge of the banks. That's where the velocities are. That's where you want to get the armoring. And so we flip-flop that from the amphitheater side over here to the play side here. That gives us nice seatable edge. But what it allows us to do is to notch this playground into this slope. So we have our ADA path coming down this way, and that creates a nice lawn pointing directly back to the field. So there's your kind of in-zone, informal seating. Get some shade back there, but that's where the families hang out and watch little Billy out there playing soccer or rugby, while the siblings are out here running around and playing on the equipment. And we're sort of envisioning a key focal point feature up at street level right next to the restaurant. You know, if it was the Headwaters fountain, a big slab of stone with water coming out of it, you can go in, you can touch it, and that leads to a little rill that would spill down into this interactive water feature where you can crawl into it, you splash around it, you float your boats down it. We can do treehouse elements that have bridges that connect to these upper walks and back to these upper plazas. And then we have slides coming down to, you know, the adults get their stage over here, the kids get their stage here, and they get to run around and pretend that they're acting like mom and dad over here. And that has kind of an informal lawn. So that, and this could be impromptu, three-piece musician acoustic set over here while the bigger event's going on. That we envision multiple events happening in here. And then that would spill out to what we're kind of calling this children's garden. It could be sensory garden, it could be xeric, you know, a lot of different ways. It could be about color or pollinators. We can have educational signage out there. So you get the active play, and then we teach them a little something about the native landscape. And we want all that play and that education to spill right down to Cold Creek's edge, so that it's a seamless play area. It's not play in creek, it's just play at the creek. And then that brings us over to our very large and accommodating field that we've got here. We have this is as close as we're ever going to get to the creek. I think that was about 35 feet. Still keeping the creek in its original alignment through here, but really keeping this vegetated. You know, we recognize that it's a very big mowed turf next to a very overgrown and riparian kind of thick canopied creek front, and that edge is important. And we want to make sure that we can get some kind of a pathway along there that ties back to the US 36 trail crossing that was built there. But then, so anchoring it, we've got, you know, development on one side and nature on the other. And as we get closer here to this facility, the thought is that this is concessions, it's restrooms, it's warming. No grease traps contemplated this time, but that could be added. More popcorn, hot dogs, soda, beer, what have you. Potentially, we were exploring whether we would want rooftop access. We didn't put that in, that option. It could be for scorekeeping later if that's something that you guys wanted to explore. But one neat idea, and I'd like to even push it more, is to thrust this canopy out over these bleachers so you get that nice shaded seating. It's north facing, so it's going to be in shade a lot, which is really good. But not everything, you know, that you still can get away from that and then get to just regular lawn seating. And so that in a nutshell is the fly-through, and I'm happy to answer any questions if I'm sure I missed plenty that you have questions about.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Anybody have any questions they want to ask?
I think I get laughed at a lot at home because when our drawing packet shows up, the big rolls, I get all excited.
Me
you know,
too.
Yeah, exactly. And looking at, architectural features and all the building, the hardscapes, everything has been presented to us so far is, I enjoy it. I look at it with scrutiny. My degree's in landscape architecture, and when I opened up this design, I freaked out. I did.
In a good way, right?
In a great way,
All right.
because, originally everything that I saw was just a small park up there, and then the turf field, and just seeing this design and incorporating the whole thing, you're probably right. This is probably going to be the crown jewel of this entire development, which originally I was expecting it to be, the square, but this is spot on. Every element that you added in here, it works well, it flows well. It's going to bring a lot of community together. But I had a couple of questions around the bridge area and through the entire area. Right now, there's a lot of existing trees in the design, and a lot of the pictures that you had in there and through the fly-through. Seem to not have a lot of those trees. What's the plan with the existing trees, and how is that going to be treated?
It's a great question, and a lot of that is scrub vegetation out there, multi-stem, small caliper. It's knockdown stuff, frankly. We're going to put back better material than we're going to take out when we do that. But we did come out and we did a tree survey. We brought out our handheld GPS unit and took a few pictures, and what we found were there are 2 cottonwoods out here. One is about right here, and one is unfortunately just in the path of destruction. This one is this guy is the keeper, and we're going to do everything we can to keep that guy. We want to leave that big one in there, and so that's easily a 2 to 3 foot caliper cottonwood. The other one, it doesn't look like it was going to save, but it's a little gangly and deformed a bit. So we are going to try and save that one big guy, but I will be candid. And then the wetland area here and wetland area here, we're going to do as much as we can to save a lot of that vegetation. And in fact, we want to come back and enhance that. We want to add more species, create more biodiversity. But unfortunately, there's not a ton of really good, mature, large caliper tree canopy out there that we can save. It's a lot of that multi-sin scrub stuff right now.
Perfect. And then in the PLD, the water spillway that you had depicted, how is that going to work? So if from the parking lot you've got some runoff, it goes into the top spillway, and it just kind of sits there for a little bit, gets treated, as it permeates through the ground or spills over. I just see issues with some parents letting their kids play in that first pool where all of the oils run off from the hardscapes. It sounds like you guys have done a lot of these projects. What would your answer be to that?
It's not going to be an area many moms are going to want to put their kids in. We have to provide some freeboard there, and actually, let me get to that, because it would be better to speak to the that part of the rendering, which I think is right around here. Let's just fly in a little closer. There. So right now there's an inlet here and here. We're going to have an inlet, I believe, right here. Those will all tie together and come into a pipe here. Right now what we're looking to do is bring that to create a head wall here. That pipe would overflow into this pond here, here, here. So there'd actually be 5 PLDs. This would probably be hardscaped, and we might even make that just a walkable pavement. You wouldn't know you're over a pipe. It'd be a slab-on-grade pavement. So what happens is in these, there's freeboard in there of at least a foot or 2, and then in that it's native grasses, and so there might be a trickle channel, a concrete trickle channel in there. I suspect not, but the fact is it's going to be a raised planter that's going to have a lowered native turf, unmanicured. They have to be maintained to get, otherwise they start looking like traps. But It's not going to be a really ideal area to play, and frankly, if we needed to, we could put a little coping steel, edge, small railing around that just to kind of prevent that further.
All right.
Sure. Sharice, just quickly heading back down to kind of the creek corridor area, something that we worked on with Ian and his group, and even all the way back to the very first concept is we know that there's several non-native invasive species down in the creek, Russian olive and a significant amount of weed overgrowth, which we treat in other parts of town. So something that we were very cognizant of from the get-go was trying to get all the vegetation back to what we would consider native, healthy vegetation. We've gone in on several occasions and done creek cleanup projects to try to pull invasive species out. So something we heavily emphasized, and you can kind of see this little corner here early on was actually classified as decent habitat. It was a kind of a nice little area within the creek. But the rest of this was actually graded as moderate to really poor quality. So the plan that we asked these guys to put together was to reintroduce what we would consider native to the creek flow and help us to identify all the non-native species that needed to go. And as Ian mentioned, hopefully we're leaving it in a condition better than we're finding it, and creating that riparian corridor that we think can exist there.
And one thing that I noticed, it's now, because the way it is now, is it was going to divide one side from the other, and by doing what you're doing, it's just opening up for a full free flow through the entire project. I think it's fantastic. The use of the bridge as a backdrop for the stage is going to, it's brilliant. It's going to be a great backdrop for it, and especially if the bridge is done in a correct manner, and it sounds like it's been kind of steered in that direction. So I'll be anxious to see how that works out. And then one other thing, if you go back out to the right end off of McCaslin.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great idea, having that right in, and then having the circular drive for the people that are coming in to turn around and use it as a drop off or whatever. But how is that right in going to work with the traffic flow going up through Marshall? So it's not depicted there, and that's why I was wondering how.
In terms of the right-ins coming in through here?
Right. So no, go back out to McCaslin.
Yep.
So how is that lane configuration going to be? It's not drawn on here, but do you know?
Alex Arnello, Public Works Director. We're working right now on a concept to add a third northbound through lane, and probably we'll use the existing pavement, but the problem is we have to take there's a pork chop here where the traffic signal pole is, so we'll probably have to take that, modify that, maybe replace the pole so we can get a third northbound through lane, and as well as the bike lane. We may just have a slip lane here for right turns onto Marshall. So this, instead of, right now there's a right turn lane, so a portion of that will become a through lane, and then right here we may have a slip lane. I want to also point out that we're working on various multi-use trail connections here, whether we pull the trail away from McCaslin. I'm concerned here we may have to have a raised crossing here for the trail and the sidewalks. So right. So we're working through that of how this is going to work. And we made it right in only because we were concerned if it was right out that people will shoot across 3 lanes of traffic to try to get to the left turn lane. So we didn't want that to happen. So that's why we've made it just right in.
Right. And that was going to be my next point, is that with that right in, how your sidewalks cross that right in, and then also to slow the traffic coming down into the parking lot off of off of the main road, they're gonna be coming in pretty quickly there. And
Right. So
how
I think
you
that's
treat
why
that.
a raised crossing
Yeah.
would work, because this isn't a road, it's a parking lot, so we want to
Right.
get them slowed down. So we'll
I like that, yeah.
provide some details there to slow the traffic down as they make the crossing.
Good.
And actually, so we're in the same boat. Ian and I get really excited when we talk about the park. But to Alex's point about parking, and we mentioned it a little bit earlier on the hotel site, something that shouldn't be overlooked on this park is this really becomes kind of the far western terminus for the Coal Creek Trail. And for those of you that have come by Town Hall on the weekends, and you've seen 100 to 200 runners starting their run here for the weekend, you've seen the mountain bike groups, you've seen folks riding the Morgul Classic Loop. This now really becomes the main trailhead, not so much tucked back behind Town Hall. So expanding the parking, providing plenty of parking, and a restroom facility where people can, either at the beginning of their ride or at the end of their ride, use the restroom facilities. There's great continuity with the Center Point and the Starbucks on the north side of the road, but that really wasn't something that was discussed early on as a key usage. But we're out here quite a bit on the weekends. You guys are out here quite a bit on the weekends, and to have an ending point on the west side of the Coal Creek Trail, we think is a huge win for us. Alex brought it up earlier with the opportunities for bike shares, bike stations, and to actually finally have what we consider maybe a formal terminus for the trail where we can look at doing signage in the future. We thought was a huge win for the Creek Corridor. The proximity to mountain bike trails, the 36 trail, the original Morgul Bismarck Loop, the Dirty Bismarck. I mean, the opportunities really become kind of endless for where you can start your ride on Park 1 or Parcel 1. And a lot of this kind of design and connectivity down into the trail, Matrix did a great job visioning all that together with us as we looked at it.
What kind of impact, though? I mean, that's a great point, because then all of a sudden you've got people coming from around the area that aren't necessarily going to be parking there to enjoy our specific park, but as a starting point to ride on Coal Creek, 30 miles out and then coming back. I mean, that could be a significant impact to our parking.
Something we've talked about quite a bit, and if you've seen the board conversations, the parking conversation has been ongoing from the get-go. Some of these configurations over here were put in specifically to try to create the two different areas, knowing that at any given time on a Saturday you might have 2 full football teams playing, with another 2 full teams coming right behind that, with just your passive park users over here, plus trail users, walkers, and runners. So really starting to look at some of those parking opportunities in the parking garages here. Something we've discussed is future wayfinding signage. We've also briefly discussed opportunities for maybe connectivity back and forth to existing parking over in the marketplace. To be completely honest, one of the big design struggles for these parks were opportunities for drop-off areas to get your kid next to a field. When we first looked at it, you said, well, you wouldn't really be comfortable as a parent kind of parking a kid here and then having them walk over. You need kind of the parking drop-off here and then an opportunity to kind of go park. And this additional parking area here was an attempt by us just to add more parking in, knowing that this is going to be a really popular amenity. And I do think we'll have to rely on parking within the town center, as well as potentially over in Marketplace or some of the shared spaces with the hotel.
And my last point on the pavilion, I think the extended roof out is a fantastic idea. I think early on we were looking at like all of the seating areas being a little more natural, free-flowing, and now I noticed that it's all very linear. And is that just to get more bodies in the seats? And
Yeah, well, and cost a little bit. We looked at that edge, and what we did is we moved that edge. We took all that tonnage of stone, which is really, really expensive, and we put it here because we think that's where it should go. As far as what do you you want to sit on a natural slab sandstone or a chamfered edge smooth concrete. You know, it just seemed the cost to benefit, it seemed better spent there. So we literally moved that tonnage of stone down to the creek.
Good.
Anybody else?
I have a few questions. I just first of all have to say this is a huge, awesome home run. You guys really, really took a lot of varied opinions and a multi-year process and developed something that I think your goal is great. Just
Thank
the Jewel for Superior. I think this is really, really special. Any ideas on monument signage at the corner of Marshall and McKesson? I saw kind of a placeholder for that. I didn't know if that was going to kind of fall in the typical.
We need to tie that back to the development and what's project and what's park and what's wayfinding. But yes, actually, you know, there's a natural corner here that's screaming gateway entry.
Yes.
You know, there's also, we need to retain this, and we started looking at this retaining wall. There's a lot of blank wall space that is also highly visible from across that pond that we think could be brought into that. Maybe that's the park and it's more project at the entry, you know, something along that lines, but absolutely. And then certainly to direct all the trail users around to where they need to go. And that reminded me, you know, the hotel access to the creek. I was thinking, you know, if I'm a hotel guy and I just rented my bike because they just installed this great bike depot, you know, my inclination would be, okay, I'm going to go to the trail. I'm going to head towards Marshall and the park. You know, maybe it would be less, you would be less inclined to go back a house hotel towards the highway, even though that's where the 36 is, more than you say, okay, where am I going? I'm walking out, I'm going to go that way. So I'd like to have our park be the front door to the Cold Creek Trail, to US 36, and skip the back of house, back of parking lot, come through our park, and then we'll get you on the right way.
Yeah. Could you just highlight real briefly for me, just I'm assuming not all of those trails are concrete, that some of them maybe are crusher fines, or could you maybe illustrate the?
Yeah, in actuality, all of this gray that you are seeing is currently proposed to be concrete simply because this is a floodway.
Oh. Okay.
I love crusher fines. I love that soft, crunchy stuff, but it'll wind up in the plat in the first event, and so we are envisioning some what we call kind of primitive trails, the little 18-inch 2-footers that'll weave you through some of the wetland areas. Maybe we could even try and do a boardwalk over a wetland, but we do want to have the little areas where you peel off the trail, you wander through, there's a nice little rock right by the creek that nobody knows about, and so then you wander off. So really through here and through here, we want to weave those in, but for the majority, for armoring it up for this type of conveyance, it needs to be concrete.
And one other question, I'm hearing a lot of, you know, we'd like to see and what we envision, and I'm wondering kind of the expectation, maybe this is more a question for staff, I don't know, of what a final development plan, and then maybe where we are just briefly as far as funding agreements between the town and the developer related to kind of when and how and if we actually get to see this park come to fruition.
I think I think what our focus has been is get through the FDP process, and then what we're really starting to focus on after this process is creek improvements, which will be funded out of the town's open space fund. Okay. So those would be funds that are available and identified in this year's our proposed budget for next year. We know that there, as Ian mentioned earlier, going to be a significant amount of permitting. But how we really see this is starting to come together as a phased project. Creek enhancements and permitting first, and then based upon, as development's progressing, having the flexibility to start to address Park 1 or Park 2 as opportunities for the bridge start to come into a line. So we've really started to look at it as a phased process. We like the flexibility, and we're grateful when the board decided to add in the creek corridor, because we knew that that was an element of the project that we could address with the town's open space fund almost immediately as the permitting process allowed.
I have a couple questions, recognizing that this is conceptual and not an FDP. So is the idea that everything's going to be grass, or is there a synthetic component to the field as well, or all grass?
No, it's good you asked that, and we actually talked about that when we were interviewing for this. Is obviously durability, playability, amount of hours you can get on there. Synthetic is great. Unfortunately, all the synthetic now comes with infill, the little rubber, black rubber stuff. We have done our best to lift this field as far out of the larger events as possible. The best we've been able to do is get it out of the 10-year, with this little corner just getting nicked by the 10-year event. Frankly, I'm surprised we got it out of the 10-year. I was hoping for 5 at best, but we actually got it up there enough. But point being, that infill will be down at the Platte with our crusher fines and all the wood chips and our planting beds. So everything that goes in here, planting beds, it all has to be done with pretty aggressive ground cover that's going to hold. Any kind of pavement or stabilized soil needs, grass pave. It needs synthetic stabilization, open cell PVC, polymers, what have you, to kind of hold that in place. But turf-wise, so this is a natural turf field. This would have no under drains. It is sheet drains basically from this corner to this corner, but it's soil-based field maintained by park staff.
Okay. And what about lighting for the fields?
So we're looking right now at a 4-pole configuration, roughly at these 20-meter lines here. And I apologize, this is a rugby field layout on here, and I should not. We'll just show a big dash line that can be anything. But roughly it would be a 4-pole system. We have talked with Patrick about lighting that up to 50-foot candles. That will get you pretty much any collegiate level event on there. And anything below high school, Little League, any intramural play, any of that could go on there. Right now, those lights are all up at 10, and that we would design those to be as full cutoff and minimal spill as possible. We would do LED fixtures for longevity. And what we typically do is we will locate smaller, low-level lighting midway on the pole, so that you only have the big field lights on when the actual game's going, and then during setup, takedown, preliminary, you can kick on these lower-level lights that are halfway to a third down on the pole that lights it much lower, maybe to 5 or 10-foot candles, so that you have some range of ability. And then we can even design the light banks to have a high or low, or high, medium, and low, so that we design in as much operability as we can for you guys. But ultimately, you can put 50-foot candles, which is a lot of light on that field.
Okay. And recognizing that this would be a phased project, looking at a crystal ball, is this a 5-year, 10-year? I mean, what's the idea, or is it too hard to tell at this stage?
Well, Patrick kind of mentioned is that we're starting to split this into channel improvements and park, and I think that's wise, because urban drainage, if we can make this maintenance eligible, which means we've designed it in a manner that they say we can come down in and muck out these ponds and get into the channel and fix drops, which we always, design that into our projects. If they deem this maintenance eligible, you're up to 15% match for all the channel improvements, which are going to be significant, and we're working on those costs now. So you have a partner there. In addition to GOCO grants, there's a whole lot of state fish and wildlife that you can get if you put in the stuff that they like. So we think you have a lot of partners on the creek work. So really that goes to the park improvements outside that, and I'm not going to say anything more before I step on my tongue here.
As you can see, there's several different moving parts, and to kind of matrix credit and the design credit, the park's been the one element that's had to kind of move and conform to all the development around it. I think it would be premature for us to talk much outside of the creek corridor, since that's directly under our control and the town's open space fund. I think your original comment about a 3 to 5 year, but it is fairly premature to tell. There's a lot of moving parts that go into it, and as you've seen, we've even up to the last couple of weeks have had to make drainage, tweaks and improvements. So I wish we had a clearer answer for you on timeline, but really outside that creek corridor, a lot of that will have to be kind of hashed out as development pushes forward. So I wish there was a more solid guess to give you, but I think that that's probably the most realistic comment at this point is, you know, we anticipate the creek corridor and the permitting process probably being a year plus, and then reevaluating where we're at in terms of development and moving forward. Whether that's on the north side or the south side, I think that really is to be determined just based on how the development's progressing.
I just wanted to clarify too, I think Commissioner Lasis spoke that this was not a final development plan. It is a final development plan. We do have a lot of moving parts, as we've related tonight. If we do have substantial changes between now and when like construction is ready to occur, we'd bring it back. But this is the final development plan. I want to make sure everyone's
Okay,
clear
sorry
on that.
about that.
A couple other questions I thought of. Just curious on the operation of the fire pit. Is that
Yeah.
just
You know, yeah, the terminology should probably, so we don't expect that to be a gas line constantly running. It's sort of a special event thing
Okay.
on, say, Blues and Brews Festival. You know, when you have a program event in here, you can throw in some logs. That could also be public art. You know, we like those little council ring areas, congregation.
Okay.
Water features aren't really that, you've got the water
We have the
feature, it's
creek.
Coal Creek,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Yeah, and they're not really applicable down in those floodways with all the water quality stuff. So we can look at that some more, but certainly we think some degree of public art, reaching out to the community around here. We were talking about underneath the bridge, what you would do on those walls, these murals, you know, that you have a great opportunity. It's a billboard for a local artist, and maybe it's transitional. You know, maybe your rotational art come through in these areas and things like that, but certainly a venue for you guys to kind of put that sort of thing forward.
And then just related to, and this maybe I was reading more into it or not, but just the comment I think that Commissioner Reese was talking about with the permeable kind of step down. I might have been misreading it, just maybe sound like it wasn't going to be an attractive feature based on maybe how you were describing it. So I don't know if like a permeable paver system in that parking lot would be a possibility to accept some of that drainage, you know, or just making sure that, I mean, that's going to be the prime walkway from that parking lot down into that, you know, kind of core heart of the park. So making sure that that's you know, attractive.
And we want to get more in that than just grasses. I think to whatever originally we were looking at is that they were landscaped beds. Or at first we thought these are seating decks for the stage. That's like the special seating area. And then we realized the sight lines aren't there. So, okay, we have this big wall behind it. Let's plant it up. Let's make it gorgeous planting beds with stuff spilling over vines and ornamentals. I think what we can get is some canopy in there, some more smaller ornamental trees with some, we're not going to be able to clutter it up a lot with ground planes, but if we could get the ornamentals in there to cover that wall and have some grassland in there, I think it will only be unattractive if you're sitting in the middle of it, less so if you're sitting and enjoying the show, right? Yeah.
I've got one question. You talked about goals that your committee had when you first laid this out. Did you think about in terms of timing of what's priority? If we're talking about a 3 to 5 year phase plan, is what is the primary goal of the committee, and what would you do first?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. We deal with two different committees that have two completely different views. So I would say the earliest identified priority was the large athletic field. And that came from the fact that currently down at Williams Field, we're bursting at the seams. And I think that there was this thought that we've got this great amenity, but we're also going to be adding in a bunch of residents who we're assuming want to have access to a sports field. So from the Parks Rec Open Space Advisory Committee, I think this and the playground feature were probably the primary pieces of the puzzle for them. A week later, meeting with the Open Space Committee, it was very much protecting the creek corridor and making sure that we had passive space. Early iterations of this park actually had formalized baseball. They could also be lined into soccer. And through the process, we really started to kind of see, and it's reflected in the advisory committee's comments, and I don't expect you to read through all of them. But the first swing at this was a very programmed park from start to finish, top to bottom. And again, one of those early challenges was starting to plan a park for residents who weren't quite in yet, while also trying to meet the needs of your existing residents, I think is why some of this has gotten us to kind of the 2-year, almost 3-year part in the planning process. But in terms of meeting a recreational need from the community standpoint, we could fill an athletic surface 5 days, 6 days a week right now if we had one, just with the existing sports teams that currently use Williams Field. We almost always have 2 teams that we almost consider odd teams out. They were either late in getting their request in, or they don't have the resident requirement to get the priority on the field. So in terms of a usable, almost immediately would be the athletic surface.
And then the last question I have, dog park in this area, is that, did I miss that? I don't know if there was something in here at all.
No, and that's a great point. It's something that he and I discussed actually prior to the start of the meeting. Throughout the town center, there's actually 5 dedicated, what we were calling park parcels. We had what we considered 1, 2, park number 3 kind of being back behind the Boulder Valley Ice Building. We've got the town's historic cemetery. Park 3, a smaller kind of village green park tucked into the neighborhood, and then this kind of awkward Park 5 almost out, kind of by 36. And then what we called park number 3, up there by the cemetery, really active park, we started looking at dog parks, dog gardens, knowing that we're going to have a lot of population, probably going to have animals, and we really don't want these 2 spaces, or actually what we started to call them 3 spaces, to become the de facto dog park. And I think that that's something that we're going to have to address as we look at finalizing the other park areas. As I'm sure you guys know, we have huge issues with dog waste in the community and our parks as is. So being proactive and heading that off and giving them a place to go is something we're hoping to do on Park 3.
Thank you.
Anything else from staff? No? Thank you. That was excellent. Really appreciate it. Mr. Jenks, does the applicant care to make any comments?
Yeah, thank you, Bill Jenks, RC Superior. I don't have a lot to add. Obviously, great presentation from staff. I think it's a nice plan. We're excited to get it in as soon as we can. On the timing issue, obviously, it's something that's foremost in my mind as we think about how this all works. One of my biggest jobs is kind of balancing the inflows and outflows of cash flow for the whole development, which is what obviously funds a lot of the park improvements. At the end of the day, really what's going to drive the parks faster is the development of the commercial core faster, because that's where the bond revenue comes from that pays for the parks. I would hope that sort of best case scenario, we're working on a phase 1 commercial development that we hope to bring forward next year that would hopefully start construction end of next year. It's all in the works and still very much in planning process. If that happens, we could raise bond revenue off of that, which would probably get us over the $50 million kind of trigger that's in the cost sharing agreement that was signed in 2013, which would actually require us to build the parks. So best case scenario, I would say 2 to 3 years. Worst case, hopefully, is 3 to 5. But again, it completely depends on the development of the commercial space and the revenue off of that. Yeah, other than that, here for questions and excited to see this move forward.
Thank you. Any questions?
I've got one. How much more of the commercial space has to go to reach that 50 million trigger?
It's a great question. And we work with a consultant on the bond modeling and how that all works. It all depends on the property tax and income. Obviously, commercial development is taxed a lot higher than residential development. So retail and office is going to drive the bond revenue faster than residential homes and apartments. We're working on all of that. I don't have the number of how much. I'm sure someone does somewhere, but I don't know off the top of my head what the number of commercial property we have to build to get to that 50 million yet. I know that the first bond I think that we raised was somewhere around 24, so I think we're halfway there already, just based on the sports stable and all of that. But again, don't quote me because I'm going off memory.
Thank
Anything else? I'm assuming we don't have any members of the audience who want to make any comments, but now's your chance. If we don't, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Comments by the commission. Who wants to go?
I like it. What can I say? I mean, it's great.
I think you take a step back and you look at the entrance into the town center. And you've got the Starbucks and then the hotel behind that. And then as you curve around to the right on Marshall Road, this park comes into view. That's the grand entrance into the town center.
That's right.
You know, it's progress, it's construction, it's timing is all very important.
I had a couple thoughts. You know, the extended stay hotel concept is, you know, typically you find them and they're just near the highway or in a non-pedestrian friendly area. And it's going to be so inviting for people who are staying there to have access to a beautiful park and then walking into town center. It's going to be a beautiful tie-in, I think, for that hotel. I think also seeing this built out and seeing the path along the creek being built out. I mean, one of the things that, you know, Boulder's got the Pearl Street Mall, but they've also got the path along Boulder Creek, and they've got the duck race that they just had this past weekend, which is just such a nice draw. And it'll be nice to have a similar draw here, where, you know, we've got a really inviting, you know, play structure and amphitheater, but then also just a nice path for bikes and pedestrians to walk along the creek. And then just lastly, I think we should have a flyover on every single presentation that comes before the planning commission. So I'd like to make a motion to require flyovers. Yes.
Anyone else want to share any comments?
I guess I'll just say, I think it's greatly done, and can't wait to see come to fruition.
Congratulations. I think this is a lot of hard work you guys have clearly put into this, and I think I can't wait to see it go. It's great.
Yep. Beautiful job. Great work. Well, does anybody care to make a motion? Yeah, I think Jason, you're the natural here.
I'd like to make a motion, the Town of Superior Planning Commission Resolution or PC Series 2016.
It's number 12.
Oh, number 12, PC Series 2016. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the Town of Superior recommending approval of the Superior Town Center filing 1B replat number 3 and the final development plan for Parks 1 and 2 on tracks A and B, Superior Town Center.
All right, thanks. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
I think he beat you to the
I beat you
drop
to it,
there, Bob. Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion's carried. That's right. Okay. So in the midst of all that, I managed to lose my copy of the agenda. Thanks. All right. Any staff announcements?
The only announcement is, I believe we will be back here on the 20th for application concerning the Resolute property. It should be fairly straightforward request for a rezone. So.
All right. Thanks, Stephen. I think that's all. Thanks, everyone.